Chapter 217. The soldiers took Judas and bound him, not without derision, for he truthfully denied that he was Jesus. And the soldiers, mocking him, said, Sir, fear not, for we are come to make thee king of Israel, and we have bound thee because we know that thou dost refuse the kingdom. Judas answered, Now have ye lost your senses? Ye are come to take Jesus of Nazareth with arms and lanterns as against a robber, and ye have bound me that have guided you to make me king. Then the soldiers lost their patience, and with blows and kicks they began to flout Judas, and they led him with fury into Jerusalem. John and Peter followed the soldiers afar off, and they affirmed to him who writeth that they saw all the examination that was made of Judas by the high priest and by the council of the Pharisees, who were assembled to put Jesus to death. Whereupon Judas spake many words of madness, insomuch that everyone was filled with laughter, believing that he was really Jesus, and that for fear of death he was feigning madness. Whereupon the scribes bound his eyes with a bandage, and mocking him said, Jesus, prophet of the Nazarenes. For so they called them who believed in Jesus. Tell us, who was it that smote thee? And they buffeted him and spat in his face. When it was morning, there assembled the great council of scribes and elders of the people. And the high priest with the Pharisees sought false witness against Judas, believing him to be Jesus. And they found not that which they sought. And why say I that the chief priests believed Judas to be Jesus? Nay, all the disciples with him who writeth believed it, and more the poor virgin mother of Jesus with his kinsfolk and friends believed it, insomuch that the sorrow of everyone was incredible. As God liveth, he who writeth forgot all that Jesus had said, how that he should be taken up from the world, and that he should suffer in the third person, and that he should not die until near the end of the world. Wherefore he went with the mother of Jesus and with John to the cross. The high priest caused Judas to be brought before him bound, and asked him of his disciples and his doctrine. Whereupon Judas, as though beside himself, answered nothing to the point. The high priest then adjured him by the living God of Israel that he would tell him the truth. Judas answered, I have told you that I am Judas Iscariot, who promised to give into your hands Jesus the Nazarene. And ye, by what art I know not, are beside yourselves, for ye will have it by every means that I am Jesus. The high priest answered, O perverse seducer, thou hast deceived all Israel, beginning from Galilee even unto Jerusalem here with thy doctrine and false miracles. And now thinkest thou to flee the merited punishment that befitteth thee by feigning to be mad? As God liveth, thou shalt not escape it. And having said this, he commanded his servants to smite him with buffetings and kicks, so that his understanding might come back into his head. The derision which he then suffered at the hands of the high priest's servants is past belief, for they zealously devised new inventions to give pleasure to the council. So they attired him as a juggler, and so treated him with hands and feet that it would have moved the very Canaanites to compassion if they had beheld that sight. But the chief priests and Pharisees and elders of the people had their hearts so exasperated against Jesus that, believing Judas to be really Jesus, they took delight in seeing him so treated. Afterwards they led him bound to the governor, who secretly loved Jesus, whereupon he, thinking that Judas was Jesus, made him enter into his chamber and spake to him, asking him for what cause the chief priests and the people had given him into his hands. Judas answered, if I tell thee the truth, thou wilt not believe me. For perchance thou art deceived, as the chief priests and the Pharisees are deceived. The governor answered, thinking that he wished to speak concerning the law, Now knowest thou not that I am not a Jew? But the chief priests and the elders of thy people have given thee into my hand. Wherefore tell us the truth, that I may do what is just. For I have power to set thee free, and to put thee to death. Judas answered, Sir, believe me, if thou put me to death, thou shalt do a great wrong. For thou shalt slay an innocent person, seeing that I am Judas Iscariot, and not Jesus, who is a magician, and by his art hath so transformed me. When he heard this, the governor marvelled greatly, so that he sought to set him at liberty. The governor therefore went out, and smiling said, In the one case, at least, this man is not worthy of death, but rather of compassion. This man saith, said the governor, that he is not Jesus, but a certain Judas, who guided the soldiery to take Jesus. And he saith that Jesus the Galilean hath by his art, magic, so transformed him. Wherefore, if this be true, it were a great wrong to kill him, seeing that he were innocent. But if he is Jesus, and denieth that he is, assuredly he hath lost his understanding, and it were impious to slay a madman. Then the chief priests and elders of the people, with the scribes and the Pharisees, cried out with shouts, saying, He is Jesus of Nazareth, for we know him. For if he were not the malefactor, we would not have given him into thy hands. Nor is he mad, but rather malignant. For with this device he seeketh to escape from our hands. And the sedition that he would stir up, if he should escape, would be worse than the former. Pilate, for such was the governor's name, in order to rid himself of such a case, said, He is a Galilean, and Herod is king of Galilee. Wherefore it pertaineth not to me to judge such a case. So take ye him to Herod. Accordingly they led Judas to Herod, who of a long time had desired that Jesus should go to his house. But Jesus had never been willing to go to his house, because Herod was a Gentile, and adored the false and lying gods, living after the manner of unclean Gentiles. Now when Judas had been led thither, Herod asked him of many things, to which Judas gave answers not to the purpose, denying that he was Jesus. Then Herod mocked him with all his court, and caused him to be clad in white, as the fools are clad, and sent him back to Pilate, saying to him, Do not fail in justice to the people of Israel. And this Herod wrote, because the chief priests and scribes and the Pharisees had given him a good quantity of money. The governor, having heard that this was so from a servant of Herod, in order that he also might gain some money, feigned that he desired to set Judas at liberty. Whereupon he caused him to be scourged by his slaves, who were paid by the scribes to slay him under the scourges. But God, who had decreed the issue, reserved Judas for the cross, in order that he might suffer that horrible death to which he had sold another. He did not suffer Judas to die under the scourges, notwithstanding that the soldiers scourged him so grievously that his body rained blood. Thereupon, in mockery, they clad him in an old purple garment, saying, It is fitting to our new king to clothe him and crown him. So they gathered thorns and made a crown, like those of gold and precious stones which kings wear on their heads. And this crown of thorns they placed upon Judas's head, putting in his hand a reed for sceptre, and they made him sit in a high place. And the soldiers came before him, bowing down in mockery, saluting him as King of the Jews. And they held out their hands to receive gifts, such as new kings are accustomed to give. And receiving nothing, they smote Judas, saying, Now, how art thou crowned, foolish king, if thou would not pay thy soldiers and servants? The chief priests with the scribes and Pharisees, seeing that Judas died not by the scourges, and fearing lest Pilate should set him at liberty, made a gift of money to the governor, who having received it, gave Judas to the scribes and Pharisees as guilty unto death. Whereupon they condemned 2 robbers with him to death of the cross. So they led him to Mount Calvary, where they used to hang malefactors, and there they crucified him naked, for the greater ignominy. Judas truly did nothing else but cry out, God, why hast thou forsaken me, seeing the malefactor hath escaped, and I die unjustly? Verily I say that the voice, the face, and the person of Judas was so like to Jesus, that his disciples and believers entirely believed that he was Jesus. Wherefore some departed from the doctrine of Jesus, believing that Jesus had been a false prophet, and that by art, magic, he had done the miracles which he did. For Jesus had said that he should not die till near the end of the world, for that at that time he should be taken away from the world. But they that stood firm in the doctrine of Jesus were so encompassed with sorrow, seeing him die, who was entirely like to Jesus, that they remembered not what Jesus had said. And so, in company with the mother of Jesus, they went to Mount Calvary, and were not only present at the death of Judas, weeping continually, but by means of Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, they obtained from the governor the body of Judas to bury it. Whereupon they took him down from the cross with such weeping as assuredly no one would believe, and buried him in the new sepulchre of Joseph, having wrapped him up in 100 pounds of precious ointments.